Hi, friends. So this question came up during a BAM coaching call, and we spent an entire hour unpacking this particular question because there's so many layers to it. And it's something that I've heard so many times from folks, but I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes, sort of like nuts and bolts version of it. Because what happens in a BAM coaching call is we get into that person's story, we unpack, sort of where their personal knots might be held. But I thought that the nuts and bolts were still incredibly valid and helpful for really anybody who is wanting to create community in social media spaces. So yeah, the concept around how do we develop better relationships with social media. And by better, I want to just make that explicit, more regulated, less dopamine inducing, less doom scrolly, and quite frankly, just more empowering and connected when you go on social media. And for me, the space that I like to play in is in Instagram, but really this concept applies to any other social media space that you're really interacting with. So I really think of it as inputs and outputs. So the first piece to really unpack is what is the inputs coming in through your screen, and is it time to maybe do a little bit of spring cleaning? And something that I do fairly regularly is go through my list of accounts that I'm following and deciding hey, do I really want to be following this person, this company? And so, for example, if you go to my cat HoSoo Lee account, I actually have 109 accounts that I'm following, which is pretty low, I would say. And I just out of my own sheer sense of curiosity, I went through and made a differentiation of who am I following and why am I following them. So 63 of those people are past or current clients, because I genuinely want to see what's happening in their lives. I want to see, even if they are, graduated from either one-on-one coaching with me or from BAM, I want to see what kind of offers y'all are putting out. I get excited to see hey, that's a thing that we talked about and you're actually doing the thing. And so 63 of those folks are clients, actual clients that I've had. 38 of them are either friends or collaborators. And so under that list are folks that, I love doing projects with, folks that I have had on the podcast and am just really interested in their work. And then 9 of those are teachers. So people that I would like to learn from in, whatever capacity. I think some of them are nervous system teachers. Some of them are, also other business coaches that I'm interested in. And so the list of inputs is quite small, and that is completely on purpose, because there are so many ways in which we can feel so shitty about ourselves. And for me, one of my barbs is when I see somebody out there in the world, particularly in the business coaching world, who is doing something in an unethical way. I have a tendency to just latch into that and be like if I'm operating from, sort of my inner wounded child, I'm how is it that they have so many more followers than me and they're doing things in a way that I know is unethical, instead of looking at my own work and being hey, how can I continue to create a safer place for people? How can I continue to have really interesting conversations with folks? And so instead of going through that inner turmoil of seeing things out there that don't resonate, I've just decided to unfollow a lot of folks. To me, that also helps keep my messaging really clear and an expression of who I am, so that I'm not being influenced by what trendy things are out there. Like, I really, really don't care about the algorithm. I've built my entire business so far on completely organic marketing. I've not put out ads. It's really just been through relationship building. And so if I have an icky, sticky relationship with what shows up on my scroll, then it makes me less excited to come to this place. And so like there's a very, very clear boundary for me in terms of like who shows up on my feed. I will say that I have a personal account as well, and on there I do follow more people, but they tend to be things like about horse training and homesteading. And for me, that's where I get into a little bit of the scroll, is because again, even there, they're all accounts that like give me a good and excited feeling to show up in that space. And I think that that's an important thing to sort of check in with your body about, is how does that account make you feel? And so as somebody who has a sacral response in human design, I can literally just make a decision of like, body scan, ooh, I don't like how that account makes me feel. I don't even need to like justify it or create any sort of like logic or like why story around it, or even like get into like, how is my unfollow going to make them feel? Like, you'd be surprised how little people are able to like sense like this like ebb and flow in their follower field. On a weekly basis, I would say, it's a little different when I've posted something controversial, but like I would say that my follower list fluctuates like anywhere between like 5 to 15 people on any given basis. And as accounts grow bigger, that number gets a little bit bigger. And then oftentimes when I do post something a bit controversial, I'll see a big mass migration out of my space. And to me, that's a welcome thing. It's a, hey, I'm glad that I showed this thing to you, because it gives you the sovereignty and autonomy to choose whether you want to be in this space. And particularly when it comes to my cat HoSoo Lee account, I think of that as a teaching space. And so if something doesn't sit right for that person, of course I want them to go find something that is going to align for them better. And so when I see those mass migrations, I welcome that in my body. That's not always been the case. That's taken some work. And so if that is something that feels a little bit sticky to you, that's totally okay too. Like, let's just honor and meet that where it's at. And, this is the kind of work that I love doing in group coaching, is like, okay, so where does that story come from? Where do those feelings of perhaps rejection or abandonment come from? Can we reassure that little kid that's inside of you that is watching that number with like a hawk eye, that, somebody following or unfollowing you has nothing to do with your value and your worth. It really just is about resonance. And to me, it always comes back to relationships. So that's on the input side, I would say. On the output side, it gets a little bit more, there's like a little bit more nuance there, right? And so to me, it's always about relationships, like I just said. And so if I want to treat my space as, I really think of it as like that independently owned whatever store. For me, the sort of like kind of store that I want to cultivate is like that cozy yarn store where like you just want to like chat with that store clerk and nerd out about that thing. Or actually my local feed store where I get my horse food from and my dog food from is like that as well. I love Nicole, who manages that store, and she's just such a welcoming, warm presence. And even if I'm not there to buy something, I just kind of like hanging out and like petting the bunnies, and oftentimes they have like puppies for sale in there. And so like that's the kind of store that I want to cultivate. And so it's not going to be this like perfectly curated box store like Target, with like planned out everything and this like sort of artificial way of staging things. Like when you come onto my page, it's just a glimpse into my life. And yes, I am selling products and I have offers out there, but it's also a place that we can just like relate human to human. And that's the kind of vibe that I want to cultivate, because that's the kind of business that I feel really excited to share with you. And to me, that then changes the kind of content that I want to create. For me, I know that there are some business coaches out there who will say, have a call to action at the end of every post, and make sure that you're sending them to your website, and, make sure that you're sending them to your podcast. And, to me, it's like, if I were to sit down with somebody who I'm relating to, and every single time I sat down with them, they were trying to sell me on something, like that would not be a cozy and safe relationship. When I go into the feed store, sometimes I'll have questions for Nicole and be like, hey, like, what kind of food do you feed your horse? And why do you choose this brand over that brand? But she's not the kind of pushy salesperson who's like, hey, like, this is the new thing that I have on offer right now. You should go get this thing. And let me sell it to you right now. Like, to me, like, that would be a reason to not go into that store. So, and so that's why I interweave, the way that I show up in that space, because it is just sort of like authentic and organic to what's happening in my life. And, the pings that I'm getting from gardening, or, the sort of parallels that I'm seeing between like my horse training and how that shows up in business, and using my life as a bit of a metaphor. Like, to me, that feels like a more organic way to relate to people than to constantly be shoving a product down their throats. Another thing that I think is really important to mention here is that this is my business page. And so as my business, I am allowed to, and in fact, it is so important for me to actually create some boundaries around who's allowed in and who's not allowed in, what kind of things can be said in this space. And so, you can argue about free speech all day long, but ultimately, if somebody were to come into my store and it was like a brick and mortar storefront, and they decided to just like tear into the yarn that's on the walls, and, slam the glass bottles that I have that are, perfectly curated, and, take the beautiful pottery that I have brought into my space and throw those on the ground, like, that person would promptly be escorted out of my space, and I would probably have a picture of them by the cash register saying, this person's not allowed in my space anymore. And so I regularly use the block button on Instagram for this purpose. Is oftentimes, if I happen to say something controversial, people come in telling me how I should think, how I should feel, what I should be saying. And that is the equivalent of you going into a brick and mortar shop and telling them how they should run their business and taking a shit in the middle of their floor. That would not be okay. And so, I think that in the beginning stages of really cultivating a relationship with social media, I was really scared to use the block button, feeling like, oh, I'm actually shutting down their voice, or, maybe I need to be honoring the free speech a bit more. But like, when it comes down to it, I am totally open to having uncomfortable conversations with people. I have them all the time with my inner circle. I have talked about how one of the things that I value most about my relationship with Andre, who helps me run this business, he's just kind of on the back end of things, is that he's constantly poking holes in the things that I say and how I say things, and challenging, like, have you thought about it in this particular way or that particular way? And to me, those conversations are so valuable, because he comes in with an energy of wanting to understand me better, wanting to understand, whatever concept it is that we're mulling over better, and comes in with a lot of like respect and honoring where I'm coming from. And so, I've had really wonderful conversations about controversial topics with people in my DMs who come in with a genuine sense of curiosity and wanting to understand. And, sometimes they do come in wanting to change my mind. And I am open to having my mind changed, but it has to come from a place of mutual respect and understanding first. And so, that's an important boundary to make, is that I think that a lot of times, because we're sharing so much personal stuff here, particularly if you're an online coach and you're a space holder, it's hard to get those lines really clear. But one of the things that has to be clearly and explicitly said, that this is your business page. This is not your personal page. And so you are allowed to treat your Instagram shop, in quotation marks, as a business. I think another thing that I wanted to bring into this space is like what to share and what not to share. Because I think that a lot of times I've had this feedback of like, oh, I can't believe that you are so open and so, vulnerable with us. And while I can appreciate that, it's because I've been able to develop in my own nervous system the capacity to have a lot of the things that are kind of sticky and, kind of scary out in the open. That's taken a lot of time. That's taken a lot of work. And I still have a very, very hard boundary around, I do not share things that are not in regulation. And so for me, it's, I have my own inner circle that I go to. I've got my best friends, I've got my husband, I've got my parents, and I use them to help me co-regulate when things feel really dysregulating. And I'm not going to come into my business space and ask for that from my community, because the product that I am sharing with you, the offer that I'm sharing with you, is that I am a teacher. And it would be inappropriate for me to cross that boundary of asking someone else to hold space for me in this place when I am supposed to be the one who's holding space for you. So the reassurance that I can make here is that I have my own people, because I'm a human as well, and because things are scary and the world is frightening sometimes, and things don't always go as I want them to or I plan them to. And so, of course, I'm going to get dysregulated. I'm not here to tell you that, like, at the end of this healing journey, you are never, ever going to feel dysregulated again. It's like, there is no end to this healing journey. There was always going to be dysregulation. It is actually important that you get dysregulated, because there's a lot of information that you can glean from dysregulation. And in that phase of dysregulation, how can you support yourself so that you can come to your business in a regulated state? And to me, again, that always comes back to my core people and being able to lean on them and trust them to hold me so that I can hold you all. Around that piece is, again, under the umbrella of like, what do I share and what do I not share? Another piece of that is, this is a teaching space for me. I teach about emotional regulation. I teach about nervous system regulation. I teach about ethical business practices, how to do relational marketing. There's a lot that we teach about in this space. And so if I am being asked to teach something that I do not know enough about, that is always going to be a hard no for me. I've talked about this a lot when it comes to the conflict in Israel and Palestine, because I was getting called in quite a lot during those weeks. I'm still getting messages almost weekly about that. And because I am not an expert on the Middle East and what is happening there, because I cannot possibly understand the nuances of what is going on in that space and what it's like for the people who are really affected by that, I will always send you to people that I am learning from. And so in the background, I am listening to a lot of things that Daniel and Gabor Mate are putting out. I'm reading books about this, and I do not feel that I will ever be in a place where I know enough about this to be able to actually talk about it and share about it in a way that is going to feel ethical. And so my boundary around being a teacher in this space is that I do not share things that I cannot teach about, because I do not have enough information. I do not have the experience and the study behind it to share it with you in an ethical way. And so I will always send questions like that whether, and again, this is kind of important as a practitioner as well. Like, what is within your scope and what's not within your scope, right? What is not within my scope is to talk about geopolitical events that I know nothing about. What is within my scope is to talk about the emotions and the feelings that might be coming up for people around that. And so if you want to talk to me about rage, if you want to talk to me about grief and guilt and shame about some of these events that are happening, I am all here for that. I am not here to tell you what is the right answer in these conflicts. I'm not here to tell you what needs to happen in these spaces, because again, I'm not a teacher on those things. So this I thought was going to be like a 5 or 6 minute video. It turned out obviously a lot longer. So yeah, I am hopeful that that was helpful for you, and let me know if this was interesting, insightful, if it brought up anything for you, if you have any further questions around social media and your relationship to social media. You can always send me an email, hello@HoSooLee.com. And I'm really glad that you are in my community. So we'll chat soon.